his slim face topped by a centre parting, always an indication to Lang of some odd character strain, pressed ever closer, and he half expected Steele to ram a metal clamp or retractor between his teeth. His intense, glamorous wife followed up the attack, in some way challenged by Lang's offhand manner, his detachment from the serious business of living in the high-rise. Lang's fondness for pre-lunch cocktails, his nude sunbathing on the balcony, and his generally raffish air obviously unnerved her. She clearly felt that at the age of 30, Lang should have been working 12 hours a day in a fashionable consultancy, and be in every way as respectably self-aggrandizing as her husband. No doubt she regarded Lang as some kind of internal escapee from the medical profession, with a secret tunnel into a less responsible world. This low-level bickering surprised Lang, but after his arrival at the apartment building, he soon recognized the extraordinary number of thinly veiled antagonisms around him. The high-rise had a second life of its own. The talk at Alice's party moved on two levels. Never far below the froth of professional gossip was a hard mantle of personal rivalry. At times, he felt that they were all waiting for someone to make a serious mistake. After breakfast, Lang cleared the glass from the balcony. 2 of the decorative tiles had been cracked. Mildly irritated, Lang picked up the bottleneck, still with its wide cork and foil in place, and tossed it over the balcony rail. A few seconds later, he heard it shatter among the cars parked below. Pulling himself together, Lang peered cautiously over the ledge. He might easily have knocked in someone's windscreen. Laughing aloud at this aberrant gesture, he looked up at the 31st floor. What were they celebrating at 11:30 in the morning? Lang listened to the noise mount as more guests arrived. Was this a party that had accidentally started too early, or one that had been going on all night and was now getting its second wind? The internal time of the high-rise, like an artificial psychological climate, operated to its own rhythms, generated by a combination of alcohol and insomnia. On the balcony diagonally above him, one of Lang's neighbours, Charlotte Melville, was setting out a tray of drinks on a table. Queasily aware of his strained liver, Lang remembered that at Alice's party the previous evening, he had accepted an invitation to cocktails. Thankfully, Charlotte had rescued him from the orthodontic surgeon with the disposal chute obsessions. Lang had been too drunk to get anywhere with this good-looking widow of 35, apart from learning that she was a copywriter with a small but lively advertising agency. The proximity of her apartment, like her easy style, appealed to Lang, exciting in him a confusing blend of lechery and romantic possibility. As he grew older, he found himself becoming more romantic and more callous at the same time. Sex was one thing, Lang kept on reminding himself, but the high-rise potentially provided in abundance. Bored wives, dressed up as if for a lavish midnight gala on the observation roof, hung around the swimming pools and restaurant in the slack hours of the early afternoon, or strolled arm-in-arm along the 10th floor concourse. Lang watched them saunter past him with a fascinated but cautious eye. For all his feigned cynicism, he knew that he was in a vulnerable zone in this period soon after his divorce. One happy affair, with Charlotte Melville or anyone else, and he would slip straight into another marriage. He had come to the high-rise to get away from all relationships. Even his sister's presence, and the reminder of their high-strung mother, a doctor's widow slowly sliding into alcoholism, at one time seemed too close for comfort. However, Charlotte had briskly put all these fears to rest. She was still preoccupied by her husband's death from leukemia, her 6-year-old son's welfare, and, she admitted to Lang, her insomnia, a common complaint in the high-rise, almost an epidemic. All the residents he had met, on hearing that Lang was a physician, at some point brought up their difficulties in sleeping. At parties, people discussed their insomnia in the same way that they referred to the other built-in design flaws of the apartment block. In the early hours of the morning, the 2,000 tenants subsided below a silent tide of seconal. Lang had first met Charlotte in the 35th floor swimming pool, where he usually swam, partly to be on his own, and partly to avoid the children who used the 10th floor pool. When he invited her to a meal in the restaurant, she promptly accepted, but as they sat down at the table, she said pointedly, "Look, I only want to talk about myself." Lang had liked that. At noon, when he arrived at Charlotte's apartment, a second guest was already present, a television producer named Richard Wilder, a thick-set, pugnacious man who'd once been a professional rugby league player. Wilder lived with his wife and 2 sons on the 2nd floor of the building. The noisy parties he held with his friends on the lower levels, airline pilots and hostesses sharing apartments, had already put him at the center of various disputes. To some extent, the irregular hours of the tenants on the lower levels had cut them off from their neighbors above. In an unguarded moment, Lang's sister had whispered to him that there was a brothel operating somewhere in the high-rise. The mysterious movements of the air hostesses as they pursued their busy social lives, particularly on the floors above her own, clearly unsettled Alice, as if they in some way interfered with the natural social order of the building, its system of precedences entirely based on floor height. Lang had noticed that he and his fellow tenants were far more tolerant of any noise or nuisance from the floors above than they were from those below them. However, he liked Wilder, with his loud voice and rugby scrum manners. He let a needed dimension of the unfamiliar into the apartment block.